Welcome to Dreamseed VR. I'm your host, Sarah Finn, and this is episode 6, Myths. So to begin, the news this week is particularly spicy. I'm going to do my best to deliver it delicately with respect to all parties involved, but there's some weird stuff going on. Let's begin with the spiciest and move on to the more mellow. A research associate at Harvard was arrested last week in regards to being accused of lying about his ties to China, because this researcher was involved in nanotechnology research. He was one of the world's experts on nanotechnology. He also was researching power supplies for nanobots as well as cybernetic tissue. Now, the thing that's interesting about this story is these details were covered by NPR. So if you want to go check out them in depth, I encourage you to do so. None of this is conspiracy theory. None of this is trying to stir a pot. If you remember from one of our earlier episodes, I believe it was our New Year's episode, I covered that the United States stated that they are going to have cyber soldiers by 2050. This is crazy. Crazy as in, whoa, the future's here, not crazy as in, oh, that's make-believe. This researcher was receiving about $8 million in grants from the Defense Department and about $10 million from the health departments. That's $18 million in research just at one institute alone on this particular research topic. That's huge. So it is a very big story that this guy was arrested. The Chinese government allegedly, from the court documents, seems to have been offering him $50,000 a month as well as $150,000 a year for personal expenses. Also arrested was another researcher who specializes in robotics and another researcher whom I believe specializes in virology or bacteriology, whatever. So that is the main story that I'm choosing to cover this week. It's, like I said, fairly spicy. I wanted to give a little bit more in-depth to it because it does signal that as far as international research goes, we are becoming much closer to realistic applications for things like cybernetic tissue. Also, the parties funding the research indicate that this is something that is anticipated to be in not only the publicly available health sector, but as well as something that's involved in the Defense Department, obviously. So that is our highlight tech news story. Also, it seems as though a second generation Google Glass is available for developers. So that's really exciting. Those of you who might be familiar with the first iteration of Google Glass, it was one of the world's premier augmented reality interfaces, and it had a lot of really interesting individuals who were doing the sort of like real world pilot testing for it, including an amazing artist named Michael Garfield, who is both an amazing intellect, a talented artist, as well as a musician. Check out his work. And yeah, so those are our two tech stories. In psychedelic news, we have a unique happening. So if you happen to follow psychedelic news in general, you may have noticed that a lot of mainstream outlets over the past several months, if not really the past few years, have been covering lots of different stories regarding psychedelic research. And in general, they have tended to focus on things like MDMA as well as psilocybin mushrooms. Oddly enough, this past week, Forbes, you heard me right, Forbes, of all of the mainstream publications, decided to have a piece on 5-MeO-DMT. If you're unfamiliar with 5-MeO, it happens to be a psychedelic that's related to N,N-dimethyltryptamine. Dimethyltryptamine happens to be the only endogenous occurring psychedelic in the human mind, and it is considered the most powerful hallucinogenic. 5-MeO is sort of even more powerful. It has a quality that is very difficult to describe. It's super transcendent. 5-MeO happens to come from a toad, the Buffovivaris toad, and David E. Carpenter wrote a piece about it for Forbes. And they go into how Mike Tyson has taken a particular interest in it in the past several years, and he felt like he had a very transformative experience with it. And if you want to do a deeper dive into the mysteries of 5-MeO DMT, I highly recommend a book called Tryptamine Palace by James Orrick. It's an incredible book. I once told him when I first met him that it read like psychedelic porn. I actually read it coming down from the epic acid overdose I shared with you all last week. It's an incredible book. It's really well written. It's very compelling. It's one of the most detailed and beautiful expressions of what the deep end psychedelic experience is like. So if you can forgive my candidness, how I review that, James Orrick's Tryptamine Palace is incredible if you're curious about going deeper into reading about 5-MeO DMT after you read the Forbes article. Also in VR news, a recent trailer dropped for an upcoming release called Sound Self from Andromeda Media. It's a really cool experience where you use your own voice through toning and oming to create an interactive experience with visuals that are reminiscent of a psychedelic experience. And I'll be sharing a review in depth as another installment. This week is myths. So as we jump into it, I want to share that some of the themes in this episode are actually the reason why I wanted to start Dreamseed VR. I had a revelatory experience last year around Thanksgiving that I wanted to distill the body of knowledge that I had cultivated over the past 10 to 15 years into something that I could share with the community. And part of those insights included some overlapping semantics between words that are used in the computer world and words that are used in the metaphysical world. And my first insight was the word avatar. Now, most of you who are computer nerds are already aware of avatars being something that you use in a computer interface to represent the body, to represent you when you go into the virtual world, or even just a profile picture in a way is your avatar, right? The word avatar actually has a root in Sanskrit, has a root in the Vedic culture of India. So just jump into my superficial definition of avatar. An avatar, Sanskrit, is a concept in Hinduism that means descent and is the material appearance or incarnation of a deity on earth. Avatar is an interesting word. It comes up in many different modern incarnations. We have the film by James Cameron from a number of years ago called Avatar, which is called that because of the main protagonist's circumstance where he plugs his mind into the body of an engineered alien being to go into the community of a tribal society on another planet. It's a pretty cool movie. If you haven't seen it, go see Avatar. Also, there is a animated cartoon called Avatar. I personally haven't watched Avatar. You can all tease me for that. But I do know that there's that little guy, Aang, and he does stuff like element bending, which is quite cool. So Avatar: The Last Airbender also taps into the use of the word avatar in a more classical sense. When we look at the connections between the metaphysical world and the computer world, there is that crossover initially with the word avatar. Now I want to go into another word that I was fascinated with when I initially got my inspiration to start Dreamseed. I wanted to go into other computer words that we take for granted. And the second one that came up was the word program. Now, most of us are familiar with pro, right? Pros and cons, positive, negative, produce, procreate, professional, protagonist, production. All of these words use the word pro. What does pro mean? A word-forming element meaning forward, forth, towards the front. As in proclaim, proceed, beforehand, in advance, prohibit, provide. A prefix of priority in space or time, having especially a meaning of advancing or projecting forward or outward, and also used to indicate substitution, attached widely to stems, not used as words. When we look at the word program, the second part of that is gram. Gram is a combining form occurring in loanwords from Greek where it means something written. Drawing, as in an epigram or diagram, oscillogram. Now, if we want to get a little bit more loose with our definitions of these things, you could think of pro as positive, right? Pro this, pro that. So I'm like pushing this to stay on. Stay on, fake third eye. Gram could also be related to its use in the word grammatical. So in a way, when you combine the preface pro and the suffix gram, you kind of end up with a word that means to manifest something with writing, to sort of encode it or imbue it with something that brings something forth. You follow? Now, there's also very blatant uses of the word, such as, this is a program. I have created for you a program that we call Dreamseed VR, like a television program or a channel. Now, a channel is another interesting word. Think about it. It's used not only to refer to channels on radio frequencies or television programs, but also it's used in metaphysical ways to describe how a medium channels a spirit into expression. This idea of channeling a being through a medium is also kind of similar to the way an avatar is a manifestation of a divine being. Now, I come from an age where we didn't grow up with augmented reality Snapchat filters. We didn't have Instagram selfie filters. And to relate that idea, I decided to don these cool butterfly wings that I made out of paper. I've been a makeup artist for a long time, and I have tried to find ways to express the mythical personality in different ways, and this is one of them. And in general, I find biomorphic forms to be really magical. I really love that internet culture over the past couple of years has had a chance to make the expression of the imagination in how we adorn ourselves much more vibrant and psychedelic. I feel like the explosion of filters that we've seen in the Spark AR community has been incredible. I remember just a little over 4 or 5 years ago that things like this were brewing in people's imaginations. I had a conversation with T Fairy, who's an incredible psychonaut and writer and thinker on these topics. She shared in particular her vision of a pair of digital wings that she always had and has had in her mind, but she looked forward to the day when they would be able to be expressed digitally and that people with augmented reality will be able to look through their lenses, whether it's Google Glass or Mojo Vision, and see her wings. And every year that passes, every month that passes, we get closer to that being an everyday experience where people can embody the unseen reaches of their imagination as their ethereal garments and really imbue who they want to be in the world in a way that isn't constrained by matter. Digital technology is bringing us closer to the unfiltered expression of our avatars in this life, in this world. You can look at someone and see who they feel like on the inside. So that's your little incubator seed this week for our concept. We have avatar and program. This week, I'm really excited to share 3 incredible looking books. I have not started any of them. They're on my short list, but they looked so juicy that I had to put them on my bookshelf. They had great reviews. Some of them have been read by close friends of mine, and that's why I'm bringing them to you for the recommended section. I have Where Wizards Stay Up Late. This is a book on the origins of the internet. Everyone uses the internet. No one really knows how it came to be unless you're a hardcore nerd. I feel like that should change. We should all be aware of the brilliant minds that came together to create this beautiful landscape that we all share our humanity on. Where Wizards Stay Up Late is by Katie Hafner and Matthew Lyon. Picked it up on Amazon, like you do. This looks fucking cool. The second book that goes into the historical background of the personal computer revolution is from John Markoff. It's What the Dormouse Said: How the 60s Counterculture Shaped the Personal Computer Industry. Now, not many people know this, but the personal computer revolution was in part inspired by psychedelics, in particular LSD. I'm going to really enjoy these 2 books. I think that they're awesome companions to one another. That's my intuition. Boom. These are your 2 historical titles. I hope you are intrigued and check them out. If you happen to, revisit this episode and comment what you thought of them. Tell everyone else watching what you thought of them. Alrighty. Our other title that we have in person for you is Uncanny Valley. This is a recent release. It's by Anna Weiner. It could be pronounced Weiner. I don't know. Anyhow, this is her memoir, and it is about her experience in the San Francisco internet tech startup culture. It goes into her critiques about it on several fronts, including the misogynistic cultural elements that she encountered. Uncanny Valley. Plus, it's beautiful and shiny. Good choice. I cannot help but squeeze 2 more, maybe 3 more titles into this book-heavy review. Are you ready? I want to talk about Techgnosis from Eric Davis. Techgnosis is an incredible book. It goes into the occult and psychedelic influences of technology over the past several decades. It's extremely heady, it's very well researched, it has a wonderful pace, and it's just kind of a non-stop ride that you don't want to put down. It's very thick, has a lot of in-depth references to the material that he's covering. There's a revised edition that was put out a number of years ago. Eric Davis is an incredible intellect. He's a funny guy. I love his style. He's got a glowing personality, and he covers really interesting topics, not only in this book, but in his other works as well. So if you happen to have an insatiable appetite after checking out those other books, or maybe even before you check out those other books, Techgnosis is one of my favorite books. It's incredibly inspirational in terms of where the human imagination goes to draw inspiration for technology. The other book I want to talk about is Donna Haraway, Simians, Cyborgs, and Women, The Reinvention of Nature. This is a really interesting book. I find her hypotheses on cybernetics as well as ecology and power dynamics to be really interesting. It's good stuff. I personally don't agree with all of the conclusions that she draws, but that's just me. Maybe you won't either. But her work is also indispensable. She's kind of like the grandma of cybernetic conceptual theory. She wrote the Cyborg Manifesto back in the 80s, and her work is sort of revolving around the idea that as we learn to augment the concepts that make us up on a cultural level, that we are already becoming cybernetic, because in that way that we program reality with the way that we program social concepts, that we change the fabric of who we are informationally with that. Donald Haraway's book is a great place to start. So that one's called Simians, Cyborgs, and Women, The Reinvention of Nature. You guys, I almost forgot. To the point where I took my butterfly wings off and my cool shirt. Elon Musk dropped a musical track this past week on SoundCloud called Don't Doubt Your Vibe. Now it's an electronica kind of Euro dance track, and it's a follow-up to a song he released a couple years ago called Rest in Peace Harambe. So if you are interested in the weird-ass musical compositions of the future King of Mars, get your ass to SoundCloud and listen to Don't Doubt Your Vibe by Elon Musk. So he has a boring company. He has an electric car company. He has an outer space rocket company. And he makes weird music. And he's baby daddy to Grimes. And might just be the future King of Mars. Weird guy. Weird guy. He doesn't doubt his vibe. Don't doubt yours. Don't doubt your vibe. So I feel like that was a exceptionally exuberant and jam-packed episode. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for tolerating my nerdy excitement. And I hope that you found something particularly interesting this episode for you to check out. I also want to encourage you to go check out our Patreon and support the show if you enjoy the content that we bring you each week, as well as check out our mother site, dreamseedvr.com, where I archive articles of my work as well as showcase artists, music, and other contents. Thank you so much for all your support, and I'll see you next week.